So, how much cash should you hold in your business? If you look at the giant companies, the Googles, the Walmarts, the Microsofts of the business space as any sort of guide, then the answer is a lot. Walmart currently has $8 billion on their balance sheet. Yes, that's billion with a B. And when you look at other players, that actually seems like kind of child's play. Microsoft currently has 75 billion and Google has a whopping $100 billion on their balance sheet. So you might be thinking, well, of course they're fat on cash. They have bigger budgets for toilet paper than I have in annual sales. Well, that might be true. There are pretty smart people running these companies, okay? And part of managing these companies is managing the financial health, and which also includes managing their risk. And holding plenty of cash and cash equivalents is one way that they do that. So the original question comes back into play then, how much cash should you hold in your business? And of course, the answer is it depends. There's a lot of factors that come into play to answer that question. I'm going to answer a couple of them here on this video. One of the things that really matters is the rate of growth that your company is experiencing, and of course, the rate of growth that you're projected to experience. If you're in a rapidly growing business, then it's really important that you have enough cash to manage your growth going forward. You want to avoid the phenomenon of what I call growing broke, which is what happens when a growing company outgrows its ability to generate enough cash to fund future operations. Another factor to keep in mind is not just growing broke, but the length of the operating cycle that the business has. This is what I sometimes refer to as the cash conversion cycle. These things actually mean the same thing, which is essentially how long does it take from raw materials to finished product to getting cash in your hot little hands. If you have a rental property business, for example, that cash conversion cycle would generally be like 30 days. Rent is paid every single month, ideally, right? If you're a farmer or let's say a home builder, that cash conversion cycle could be 12 months. It's a lot longer, right? This is really important for you to know because the cash conversion cycle is what I consider when I determine the minimum amount of cash that I want to be holding in any one of my businesses, or what I recommend for any of my clients that I'm looking at their financial statements. I'm saying, hey, look, you probably need more cash based on your operating cycle. So, what I do is consider the amount of cash that I need to cover expenses and also as a percentage of sales for one operating cycle. So let's say, for argument's sake, that you have a rental business and your cash conversion cycle is nice and easy 30 days. Here's how I would figure out the amount of cash that I want to be holding in my operating account. So let's take a look at this example. So, first of all, what I'm going to do is this is just a basic income statement. You'll notice the date right here is January 1st to January 31st. So, just obviously it's 31 days, but it's basically a 1 month cycle. So, the rents that are coming in here on the revenue, and this is just a typical income statement, $35,000 a month in rents. And you've got your expenses, your administrative interest, marketing, depreciation, utilities, wages, and so forth. And your total expenses added up are $24,180. So, your net income, which is revenues minus expenses, is your net income is $10,820 for the month of January. Okay, so now what I'm looking at here is I look at a couple different things when I am considering the amount of cash that I want to consider holding. So if you listen to a lot of the financial gurus, what do they tell you, right? You should hold 6 months worth of expenses. And I don't really know that I agree with that. I think it's a safe play. I don't think it's the safest play. And this is one of the main reasons why I think there's people that are not holding enough cash. So this is where I depart from them just a little bit. And again, not to be argumentative, but I just think that I've experienced some real ass beatings in my life, and this is especially from a financial perspective, and I try to avoid that as much as possible. So this is the way I look at that. So what I have here is cash as a percentage of net operating expense, or so this is net operating expense, cash per sales, and cash per growth. So let's look at cash per net operating expense. So net operating expense, let me just explain what that is. Net operating expense excludes non-cash expenses such as depreciation and interest, but it adds back mortgage payments. So let me explain that. You want to take out the non-cash items because they don't really impact your cash, like non-cash items, specifically depreciation and amortization. Interest is also removed, but we're also going to add back the mortgage payment. Well, why is that? Because it matters in your cash flow. So basically everything that when it comes to an operating expense, I want it to show up in the operating expense category. So that's why I'm saying I'm going to I'm going to take out the interest, take out the depreciation amortization, and add back any mortgage payments or basically any loan payments. Okay. So let's go back to the chart here. So I would add back this actually should say loan payments. So just to be clear here, I'm not saying just mortgage payments. I would just say loan payments in general. You want to add that back because you want to make sure you're also adding in the payment of principal, because that you have to pay principal and interest. You can't just pay interest if the loan payment is actually requiring you to pay a full principal and interest payment. All right, so basically what I did is I took out depreciation and interest and added back a loan payment. Here's where I have a cash as a percentage of sales. So this is just basically the amount of sales that I have during that operating cycle. That's the amount of cash that I would want to hold for 1 month. And now down here, this is cash based on growth. So my annual forecast of growth is 10%. All I did was take that 10%, divide it by 12, and came up with a monthly growth number of 0.833. So basically it's 35,000 times 1.833, and that gave me that number right there. So what I would do, that also budgets it into the cake, or bakes in the cake for me, the amount of growth that I am projected to have over the next year, right? So that's a very conservative estimate, and that's the amount of cash that I would actually want to hold, which is more cash than what I'm actually holding right now, more cash that I'm projected to have rather than just the cash that I have today. Does that make sense? So here's where I'm looking at, and this is what I do over here is now that I've got the multiplier, okay, so this is the multiplier right here. Now I'm just going to figure out how many months worth do I want to hold, and look at the difference. Just look at the difference in 2 months. If I'm just setting aside expenses versus how much cash growth I would want to set aside, man, that's a it's much more conservative to set aside this over here than just simply setting aside expenses over here. And this is the reason I'm telling you this, is because I've got some experience here. Back in 2008, I climbed into 2008 with $6.5 million worth of real estate, and I had about 5 months worth of expenses. And I burned through that in like 40 days, right? So I had about $150,000 in cash, and yeah, I burned through it really, really fast when 2008 came along, because I just couldn't weather that kind of storm. No one was working, no money was moving. It was awful. So for me, I'm basing this a little bit from an empirical experience based on what I went through. So you might be saying, okay, well, that might be great for a 30-day operating cycle, but what about a 45-day? Okay, well, this is where it gets a little wonky. And again, the numbers aren't perfect. But again, all I did was just run an income statement based on 45 days, January 1st to February 15th, came up with a 45-day income statement and just basically did the same thing, right? So the numbers are a little different. You can set this aside. Now, again, I came up with cash of 47.5 based on this is based on an operating cycle amount, right? So this, even though it says months, it's actually really operating cycles. So this is 2 operating cycles. This is 3 operating cycles. It's actually not months. Even though it says months, it's incorrect. I'll fix that on the on the template for you. But it really is. It's operating cycles. If you look at this, so this is 6 operating cycles. So it'd be 6 45-day operating cycles. So I have $356,000 in cash to make sure that I'm covering those operating cycles, right? Versus over here where I only have 209,000. So you might be thinking, man, that's a lot of cash. And before you say it, hold on just a second. I know some of you are saying, oh my gosh, you're losing so much purchasing power to inflation. Yeah, you're losing purchasing power to inflation. No question about that. But here's the deal. You're managing your risk much, much better. Tell that to Walmart that's holding $8 billion in cash. Tell that to Southwest Airlines that's holding more than half their market capitalization in cash. They're worth about 18 billion right now in market cap. They're holding 10 billion on their books. What do they say? What do you say to them that, oh, you're losing all that money to purchasing power? No, what they have is wealth insurance. You've heard of health insurance, right? Right? Well, you don't use your health insurance every single month. I mean, a lot of us don't. And if you're not, you'd say, I could make an argument. It's like, well, you wasted that money for that month, right? Well, that's exactly when you're losing purchasing power to a little bit of inflation. I'm sorry, that's your wealth insurance premium. Okay. So that's why you want to hold, yes, of course, hold that in as high a yield as you possibly can to help offset the inflation if you can. But that is your wealth insurance. And as Jim Collins had said in this one of my favorite books, which is Great by Choice, when you have the amount of cash, you have options. When you have cash, all the great companies in that book that they tracked, they had 3 to 10 times more cash than their industry counterparts. And they were able to take advantage of good luck events when they came along, and they were able to weather the storms when they came along. And the storms will always come. So this is why you want to have a very healthy cash balance on your balance sheet. So you can see how this could work for you, right? And if let me just make this real quick point. If you like training like this, I've created a free business owner's money and finance course complete with templates just like this one. So you can figure out your own cash and what you need in your own financial situation. So in this course, I'm going to go over some of the basic accounting and very basic bookkeeping stuff that you need to know as a business owner, and only the stuff you need to know as a business owner. For example, we're going to talk a little bit about the general ledger, and only the stuff you need to know as a business owner about the general ledger. Hint, it's not very much that you need to know about a general ledger, right? But so if you'd like access to that, there's a link in the description. You can click on that at the end of this video. So let's make one last point, and then we're going to land the plane. So let's say that you're a realtor and your cash conversion cycle is all over the place. You get 2 closings one month and then nothing, and then 5 closings the next month, right? Does that sound familiar to you realtors out there? What's tricky is that most realtors that I know don't run their real estate business, their real estate sales business, very much like a business. They get money in, they pay bills that need to get paid, and as a result, they often run from periods of feast to famine. My suggestion is to start tracking this like a business and put stuff into an income statement and annualize these numbers as best you can. Annualize the number of closings that you do. Be really conscious of your business expenses, such as fuel consumption and other things that you can deduct, like office expenses and things like that, or office supplies and things like that, right? So when you come up with an annual number, then you can divide that out by 12 and come up with an average, basically an average dollar amount for your commissions. All right. So let's look at this as a quick example, as an income statement. So we're going to go here to this last little tab right there. Okay, we'll bring it back over. So all I did here is I just basically came up with an income statement for an entire year, basically January 1st through January 31st. I'm sorry, January 1st through December 31st. And that's a full year. But I'm coming up with a 30-day operating cycle. So basically had $325,000 in commissions, had my office expenses, had to pay for yard signs, some marketing expenses, desk fees, etc., right? Professional fees, had to pay a VA, right? So I had $40,000 in expenses. And that might seem a little light. I don't know. It seems about right, I guess. Then you had a net income of $285,000. So let's go over here and look at the cash holding multiplier. So if you did just based on expenses, man, look, you're only holding $3,300 a month in your net OPEX. Well, yeah, that's because your expenses aren't very high, right? So, but if you held cash as a percentage of sales, look how much more cash that you'd be holding each month. Now, let's scan over here. If you were looking at this just based on expenses, you would only hold $20,000 in cash for 6 months. And man, that's rice and beans. That's that's ramen noodles for 6 months, right? That's substantially changing things for you. Doesn't give you a lot of options. When you have cash, you have a lot more options. So let's look over here to cash as a percentage of sales when you have 6 months based on growth, or even just based on this center number here, which is basically what I like. This is the number that I like in here, just cash as a percentage of sales, or cash per sales. It's $162,000 in cash that I would be holding for that 6-month period of time. Now, this is just based on the amount of cash that you would hold based on sales. That's the number that I like. That's the number that I like to hold, because here's the reality. When you're holding cash like that, you're not holding cash until like you run out of money and then basically you close business. No, I like to think of it as, how much money do I have until I need to pivot? right? So it's not like you wouldn't change anything until the end of the 6 months. No, obviously, if you're at the end of month one and you had kind of a slow month, and you start getting into month two, and you're starting to realize that maybe you're starting to see the beginning of a trend here. So you start maybe cutting back on certain things and maybe increasing your marketing expense. Why would you increase your marketing expense during a down economy? Because everybody else is cutting their marketing expense. That's when you and the smart money needs to increase your marketing expense. Trust me, that's what the A players are doing. Is they are increasing their marketing expense when everybody else is cutting theirs. So this is when you have cash, you have options, and that's one of the things that I want to make sure that you are sitting very, very healthy should there be a downturn, so you could take advantage of good luck events when they happen and weather the storms when they happen. All right. Okay, so this video is getting a little long. Let's go ahead and land the plane. Remember, if you'd like access to the free Business Owners Money and Finance course, click the link in the description and I will get that right over to you. All right, that's all I have for today. You guys have a great rest of your day. We'll see you next time.